Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. It's a great pleasure to be with you here today, talking about a very important subject, which is One Health. And this is an initiative that we launched at UM6P on the 3rd of November, 2025. And that's really coincides with the International Day on One Health. It's really a great, I would say, initiative that we launched at the university. And so basically, you will, through the day, we have an exciting program, by the way, and you'll come to understand what's really One Health is about. It's really interconnectivity of all basically systems, planetary systems. You cannot really work on one system and ignore the other one. So that's basically that's interconnectivity. And just to get going, we will start with a keynote speaker. And then we'll have a panel discussion, then 2 other presentations on nutrition, and then human health. And then we'll have an exciting program in the afternoon put together by students. The whole thing is really developed, designed, and will be run by a student. And we have a saying in Arabic, it says, Al-Aql Salim fi Jus Salim, a healthy brain and a healthy, I would say, body. But I would add in a healthy, I would say, planet. Because this interconnectivity, you cannot have a healthy animal or a healthy human without having all the other systems healthy, from water to soil to plant to air to the oceans, etc. Okay, well, now let me introduce our first keynote speaker, Dr. Julie Garnier. Is a leading One Health expert and veterinarian with over 25 years of experience working in threatened ecosystems. Co-founder of the Odyssey Conservation Trust, she has developed community-based One Health programs integrating science, traditional knowledge, and gender-responsive approaches to improve the health of people, animal, and ecosystem worldwide. And she will be talking to us today about One Health now, biodiversity, and the core of sustainable, the core biodiversity at the core of sustainable businesses. So you'll come to understand why it's exciting to know what is the role biodiversity, what is the link biodiversity and One Health. Dr. Garnier. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much, Professor Albusini, for welcoming me here today. It's an amazing day today, having such a whole day on One Health, and it's a great pleasure to be here, as well as an honor to come back to UM6P. So One Health now, biodiversity at the core of sustainable businesses. One Health is already a challenge, as you will see as we go through explaining what it is and what it entails, but I will try to take you along a pathway of thinking why and understanding why One Health need to be embedded now at the core of business strategy. Next slide. Oh, sorry. So yes, One Health now, biodiversity at the core of sustainable businesses. I would just like to come back to some moments that we've had here, trying to mainstream One Health with students, with different programs at UM6P, including the SF school. And these are various activities that we've been conducting to try to invite students to have a different approach to the one they were used to. We conducted various events with the students, we developed photographic contests, we developed workshops, we developed programs, and that was very successful, and we can now see the result of all the work that has been done at UM6P to come to this One Health Day. As Professor Albusini said, the planet is not in a very good state, and we are putting not only our planet at risk, but our very existence at risk. Human activity have put the Earth's systems completely out of the safe boundaries. I'm sure some of you are familiar with the planetary boundaries, and we've got the safe operating zone, which is the green circle in the middle. And recently, the last assessment have showed that 7 out of the 9 planetary boundaries have been transgressed. The last one was ocean acidification. And we know also that these put our different key elements and tipping points, again, another element. Tipping points are thresholds after which a phenomenon reaches a point of no return. This modelization is based on climate tipping points, and I invite you to consult the website if you're not familiar with it. And we've got tipping points across the planet. If we lose one, then it has a cascading effect on all the other ones. But, for example, the West Antarctic ice sheet, as we know, if we lose it, it's going to have a huge impact on sea levels. I was just reading no later than yesterday that actually we don't have one tipping point, but 40 tipping points underneath. So that means that things are evolving from time to time, reaching a threshold level, and huge impact. From time to time, it's going in a sort of smoother way that we might not be able to see. But also, we don't know all the tipping points. We don't have all the information because all these rely on biodiversity, and I'll explain to you how this works. And all these tipping points are near being reached. And as you can see, the fact that they're all relating to one another will have a huge cascading impact. The one in yellow, coral reef, well, sadly, last year we've reached that tipping point. We're losing coral reef. We might not recuperate them. And as we know, coral reef are supporting more than 1 billion people. They're supporting a quarter of all marine life. And all these crises, the biodiversity, the climate, land crisis, cannot be dissociated. Climate change has got a huge impact on biodiversity loss. We are seeing mass mortality events in wildlife. We have seen some saiga antelopes, for example, in Central Asia, suffering mass mortality, losing hundreds of thousands of animals in 1 week during specific times of their reproductive lives. So that means that we can lose biodiversity at huge tracts of biodiversity at any point. So all these are feeding one another, all these crises are feeding one another. These on the right are the various drivers of biodiversity loss, climate change, habitat loss, pollution, but now, you know, they're all again combined into vicious circles that have feedback loops, so they're reinforcing one another. And obviously food systems, we know, are top on the ranking list when it comes to being driving the crisis. And sadly, they're contributing to, you know, water usage, using 70% of the water, contributing to 70 to 80% of the water, of the biodiversity loss, contributing to climate change, while we know soils also are huge carbon sinks and need to be restored as the oceans so that we can address crisis together. If food waste was a country, it would rank at the 3rd largest emitter of carbon. So we have all these figures, we have all this information. Now we need to have a more systemic approach. One Health, what is the concept? I like to say One Health is a culture of communicate, collaborate, coordinate. To start with, One Health recognizes that everything is interconnected. Human health, domestic and wild animal health, plant and ecosystem health. It's all interdependent. That's the paradigm which is the basis of One Health. But it's also an integrated approach. And what we try to do when we implement One Health is to sustainably balance and optimize. One Health is about trying to compromise, to balance, to optimize the health of everyone. That means integrating all sectors and disciplines, from the environment, from human health, animal health, but not only health, also, architecture, also land planning, also water systems, all disciplines. And that means also involving all sectors of society at all levels, local, national, regional, global. And as I said to start with, it's about communication, collaboration, coordination, and capacity building. One Health for the Agenda 2030, it makes sense. When we look at the progress we've made on the Agenda 2030, well, last year there was a sad constat, saying actually 18% of the SDGs are going backwards. Only 18% are going forward. In 2017, with a group of colleagues, we demonstrated how One Health could help to make a lot more progress on the SDGs, and how having a systemic approach would facilitate and reaching the Agenda 2030. We were saying it's a unique opportunity to shift into the One Health paradigm, having all the SDGs interconnected. We also showed at the time, these are the small SDGs which are highlighted in yellow, that these were posing a bit of a problem. There were antagonisms with the other SDGs, and they were relating to businesses, because they were focusing on economic growth, because they were focusing on the usual consumption and production patterns. Later on, we developed a vision and a framework by which we were saying, how can we reach a vision which improves the health of all, of ecosystems, of people, of animals, of plants. And maybe are you familiar with the system thinking approach and the leverage points by Donella Meadows, which is a very famous book that was published many years ago. And the leverage points perspective is showing that if you want to bring change, you need to have a different vision at the end. This is the far box on the right. And as we see, if we press on that point, it will have more impact. So yes, One Health, if we want to bring change, it's about having a paradigm shift, a different vision by which we are shifting from the pursuit of GDP and overconsumption towards well-being and resilience, by which we are shifting from humans being above nature to humans being part of nature, by which we are shifting from extraction to regeneration, and by which we're reconnecting to healthy environments. And if we embed a gender-responsive One Health at the heart of these elements and institutions, which you can see on the left, policymaking, civil society, academia and research, and businesses, we need to embed a gender-responsive One Health at the heart of business strategy, because they are part of the solutions and they are part of the problems. So One Health, the underlying principles, maybe you're familiar with some of them. We need that paradigm shift, and we need to embed biodiversity at the center of that paradigm shift, and recognizing the anthropogenic drivers, how they are all connected. We need also to have multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary response, integrating all forms of knowledge and sectors and disciplines. We need equity. We need gender-responsive and human race-based approach. We cannot ignore discrimination anymore. And we need a system thinking approach. This is fundamental. This is really one of the core elements of One Health. Having a holistic approach to understanding the problem and deploying solutions. But having that systemic perspective, again, the environment needs to be at the core of these elements. Before, we started to hear about the One Health approach after COVID, when people realized actually we've got disease emerging from the interface. People talked about the interface between wildlife, the environment, and humans. But no, actually, we are part of this ecosystem, and we need to recognize that the ecosystem is really where One Health needs to be embedded. Biodiversity loss is accelerating beyond safe limits. The latest Living Planet Index shows that we've lost 73%, 73%, nearly 3/4 of the population of mammals, birds, amphibians, reptiles. And that clearly puts ecosystem services at risk, because now we're reaching the World Biodiversity Integrity Index is at 79%. The security threshold, now we're reaching thresholds everywhere. So we clearly need to change our paradigm. As you can see on the right, we are living in actually an environment where livestock are clearly dominating. Nearly 60% of the biomass is made of livestock and pets. Humans, 36%, 39%, wild mammals, 5%. 5%. Can you believe that? Can you visualize it? How the wildlife has now become, the French expression, a peau de chagrin. It's becoming so, minute compared to the rest. But that means if we've got that much livestock, if we've got all these domestic species, then we can also preserve some genetic diversity and biodiversity, because we've got all the endemic breeds, all these breeds which are so important to maintain, because they're the key to resilience. As you can see, they will be more resistant to disease, they will be more adapted to their climates, they will be more adapted to the food resources that they have, and culturally, they've got a huge significance to people. We cannot ignore people. We cannot see just wildlife on the side, or livestock on the side, or humans on the side, and then the forest on the other side. Everything is part of the same system. And culturally, livestock, as we know, are very important and significant. And the endemic breeds are also a key element of resilience building. Biodiversity is a fabric of life, but it's also the foundation of economic value. What's important is that you've got all these different elements in land, ocean, water, atmospheres, and biodiversity at different levels, at ecosystem level, species level, genetic level, and they feed into one another. Biodiversity is going to help strengthening all nature, and ecosystem services at what results from all the nature interactions. We always trying to quantify, to enumerate, to put in boxes things. With nature, it's very difficult. Ecosystem services are very important to enumerate because they reflect nature contribution to people. So we have provision of services, regulations such as disease regulation, we've got cultural services, but we know so little about biodiversity and we are losing it before we know it. We have maybe 2 million species that we know of, and we estimate there might be in nature 10 million, 50 million species, and we're losing them before we know them. So by being able to say, well, actually, that's exactly what they're doing. Look at the microbiome. We've only discovered it recently. Who could have guessed that we were an ecosystem ourselves with all this microbiota in our guts, on our skins, everywhere, which is actually the key to our life, key to our immune system. Biodiversity is our best ally against disease. We are finding new remedies, new drugs from disease, from nature. This is an example with Artemisia, which is used to treat malaria. And it's not something on the side, you know, it's not an alternative medicine. WHO recognizes that traditional medicine has many benefits. It supports, WHO supports the discovery and trials of discovering new drugs from nature. Again, we cannot afford to lose nature. It supports our health in so many ways. It supports our way also in regulating disease. If you've got a range of wild species, that will create a dilution effect in disease transmission that will be protective of us. And we have this at a macro level with species. If we lose some species, then we have a higher risk of contracting disease, especially tick-borne disease and all the vector-borne disease that we're seeing, you know, and that rely on some wild species. If we lose the wild species, then these diseases are going to be transmitted more easily to humans. We've got also, we can see that at a micro level, if we've got a decline in biodiversity, we've got microbial deprivation, disturbed immune response, and imbalance, and a higher risk on inflammatory disease. And as non-communicable disease are related to inflammatory disease and are one of the biggest threats to human health now. So biodiversity loss is at all levels. It's also at the level of a landscape. And that's important because that's what we see, that's what we work with. Again, there is a state of usually of equilibrium between different habitats. An ecosystem is made of different habitats. And if you've got healthy population moving around these different habitats with different dynamics, that supports the ecosystem immunity. So we've got immunity at a micro level, at a species level, at a landscape level. And again, when these habitats and ecosystems are degraded, unbalanced, stressed, that leads to a higher susceptibility to infections and transmission of disease. So we've got all these crises, and we know biodiversity supports our health, our well-being. This has been well framed, demonstrated in this one of the latest IPBES report, which is the nexus, the interlinkage among biodiversity, health, food and health. And this is a very substantial report. I invite you to consult it if you want. You've got the demonstration and all the references showing how biodiversity supports water provision, food provision, health. Health is not just absence of disease. Health is also well-being. Health is also supporting your immunity. Health is also about equity. And how biodiversity also supports climate change, mitigation and adaptation. So biodiversity loss is a threat to our survival. And businesses have to realize now, before it's too late, that it's also a serious threat to their survival. This is again the latest IPBES report on businesses and biodiversity. And it's very instructive in the sense that it's showing how businesses have got dependencies on biodiversity and how they impact biodiversity. And these impacts and dependencies are very important to quantify for businesses, because they need to realize actually that loss of biodiversity is affecting their businesses. Some are more visible than others. Obviously, in food systems, in agriculture, it's a lot more visible, but all businesses are actually affected. All the workforce, if you've got the loss of biodiversity, if you've got the loss of clean air, if you've got huge temperatures. It's not just climate change. Climate change can be, as we've seen, climate change and biodiversity loss are two crises mutually reinforcing one another. If we address the biodiversity loss crisis, we are going to help to adapt to climate change. So this is really important for businesses to understand today, because at the moment what's happening is that businesses are externalizing the environmental cost. This is on the side. It's not, part of their strategic and the core of their activity. They don't see the relationship. And this has as an effect not only to continue business as usual and destroy biodiversity, but also amplify all the risks associated. So it's very important that now, today, if we want to address this crisis, businesses realize that biodiversity loss is a financial risk as well. Biodiversity is the responsibility of the private sector. I'm not going to be the one telling you in Morocco how important this is. Fisheries, which are so important in the GDP and in job creation. And I believe there is one of the latest scientific publication which has showed that the fish stocks have declined by 30% since 2017. And we have the tools. There is a very recent publication which is trying to show a framework for One Health with fisheries. It's still trying to divide things a bit too much for my taste, but it's an interesting paper which is also using eDNA, environmental DNA, to measure biodiversity, marine biodiversity. That shows we have the tools, we have the knowledge to assess what impacts we have on biodiversity, what impacts businesses have on biodiversity, and what their dependencies are. This is a table that I won't go into details, but you can see different methods which are available for different type of operations or value chain or corporate, all the different sectors in businesses. So we have the science, we have the tools. How do we do now? How can we make sure that we embed a biodiversity-centered One Health approach in businesses? As I said, One Health is about collaboration, communication, working across sectors and disciplines. Easy to put on the paper, not easy to put in practice. We need to bring, when you're working at a business level, they need to actually bring all the relevant stakeholders around the table and disciplines involved to identify the risks, the dependencies, the impacts, but placing biodiversity at the center, really addressing all these impacts. And you have biodiversity impacts, but also the dependencies on biodiversity and what biodiversity restoration could bring to the business. That needs also to be addressed. We need to identify shared resources, conflict hotspots, and as I said, identify positive leverage points and co-benefits, addressing all the values of biodiversity. One Health needs to be also a bottom-up approach. Communities are so important stakeholders. If you want a One Health initiatives, or if you want to embed a One Health approach in a sector, starting with also the resource users and the resource producer, the key people who are on the ground, is very important. They have incredible knowledge about resilience, because if they are still using these resources, it means they've been able to use it sustainably and to protect it so far. We need also to foster cultural and gender equity, and we need to empower local communities as One Health sentinels. They can be the key players. They are the stewards of biodiversity. We also need to change our narratives from nature as a resource, as a nice to have, as something we can dig in, to nature as a partner. So that means placing One Health at the heart of training and education program, and this is such an amazing event today at UM6P, clearly showing how UM6P is embedding and mainstreaming One Health approach in all its schools and in all its education program. We need also to use all the tools, communication tools we have to make people understand the benefits of nature. We need to also promote coexistence narrative, shifting the conversation. At the moment, there is a One Health movement which is pointing at wildlife as the source of disease, of all our problems. But no, the problem is us and what we have done with wildlife, what we are doing with the interface between livestock and wildlife, and the fact that we have destroyed so much wildlife. So we clearly need to shift the narrative as nature and wildlife being our best ally. And we need to engage business collaborators in campaigns. There are so many things you can do, in One Health initiatives, and engage collaborators in businesses to be part of the transformative change that you're trying to bring. Nature-based solutions are also are used more increasingly. Nature-based solutions are restoring natural or modified ecosystems, but we need to not only focus on nature-based solutions, but we need also to incorporate them in a broader One Health perspective. I would like to go back. We started with the tipping points, the climate tipping points, which are alarming. Now, we can build on this tipping points framework to find the best solutions which are going to bring change. There is a very interesting model which has been developed by Lenton, and you can see on the graph at the bottom how an innovation can be evolving and can be adopted and bring change. In brown, on the bottom graph, you've got the technological innovation. In the middle graph, you've got people. Top graph, you've got nature. And to bring an innovation and transformative change will follow an S-curve. At the beginning, you've got a small innovation. It starts. It's a startup. That's what we call a startup. Then it will be little by little adopted. That's the graph in the middle. You've got a few people using it. They're the early adopters. And then there's going to be a sort of contagious effect, replication. And that's what's going to allow the model to be more used. And that also is happening at the same time that the innovation is evolving and is improving. And on top of this, we need to bring nature. That's the top graph. If we are bringing the nature and biodiversity element, then that will accelerate things even more. What's not on that graph is that it will amplify things in a positive way. Conservation agriculture, we were talking about it with some colleagues which are probably a lot more knowledgeable about it than me, but I just wanted to highlight a paper by Rockstrom, which has just been published lately, which is also bringing all the evidence that it could be really a model to apply for sustainable agricultural practice, because it also restores biodiversity. And as you can see on the left, if we have the implementation of crops, conservation agriculture with diversity of crops, no tillage, soil cover, then that will contribute to soil health and biodiversity restoration, restoring water cycles, nutrient cycles, which will feed back into food provision and production. So by embedding these new innovations, yes, we can accelerate change. And as we can see on the right, well, if we accelerate change, if we are clearly not continuing on this downwards trend that you can see with the dark curve, then we can restore nature, we can restore our health, we can envisage a safer future. But all that means questioning, restoring, and reframing our relationship with nature. I like this graph, this figure, because it shows the different ways you can frame your relationship with nature. You can live from nature. This has been clearly the way economic models have worked. We have considered that nature had infinite resources that we could dig in, we could use, we could throw away, and that model can no longer exist. There is another model which is living in nature, where you consider that actually, yes, there are rivers, they have fish population, you can use them, but we need to understand, we need to live with nature. We need to respect and understand our dependency from nature, and we need to respect it. We need to respect it as local communities, indigenous communities, and a lot of people are now understanding their relationship with nature. Nature is what is going to save us. We need to respect it, we need to conserve it, we need to regenerate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Garnier, for really convincing, I would say, at least me, that biodiversity is really the heart of everything, of One Health. So that's really give immunity, I would say, to the whole system, I mean, all the systems, basically. So that's basically the foundation of everything. That's great. Please note that we'll have a Q&A question, later on at the end of the session. So now we'll follow the panel discussion on, of course, One Health. And then let me call I'll start with you, Dr. Garnier. So just come to the stage, please. Dr. Garnier, please. And then we'll have our colleague Shakir from the International Water Research Institute. Dr. Shakir, of course, is a water specialist. And you will see that the panel is composed of really components, I would say, of One Health. I'm sure everybody dreams of having clean water to drink. Otherwise, you'll get sick. And that, because One Health, I would say, approach all should lead, all what we do should lead to a healthy human, healthy, of course, animals. Dr. Eduardo from Italy, so he will be really covering the human aspect of the One Health. We have the colleagues Schwan and Xavi, so covering the soil, of course, health and the agronomy and all that. And Dr. Miluki is talking, of course, we'll be covering the air. If you don't have clean air, you will not be able, of course, to breathe, will not be healthy. So I don't know whether I will sit or stay here, but probably I'll just sit somewhere. Is that okay? Yeah, great. Well, anyhow, thanks a lot for being, of course, with us today. And again, to continue the discussion on health, I was so pleased with your presentation, Dr. Garnier. So I think that's the stage, basically, for our discussion today. And just to kick off, just to get going, I will, do you hear me now? Similuki, do you hear me now? Oh, well, they are saying that they are not hearing that much, so. Okay now? Okay, good. The title of the session today is One Health in a Connected World. And basically, through the presentation of Dr. Ghani today, everything has to be connected. We cannot really ignore an aspect of the systems, I mean, the planet system, I would say. Otherwise, tank will not work. So if you just focus on, say, water or air, whatever you would say that, and if you have a dead soil, then we'll not be able definitely to produce. Or we don't have a clean air, we don't have clean water. So everything I would say is interconnected so that you are able to have a healthy animal, healthy human, healthy planet. So we'll start with the general questions to everybody, and then we'll follow with, depending on the time, with other questions as well. Now, I'll start with you, Professor Maluki, from your perspective. How can we better integrate human, animal, and environmental health systems to tackle today's most urgent global challenges? And of course, what are key barriers we need to overcome to make this integration successful? Yeah, please go ahead, Dr. Maluki.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mustafa, for this introduction. Well, I will express this in, looking on my field, personal field, actually, research field, which is air quality and climate. And for me, one of the big challenges is somehow related also to Africa context. It's air quality, air pollution in Africa, and relating to that air quality, climate, because both of them, air quality and climate change, are linked, interlinked, because of the atmospheric species, human is emitted, emissions from human activities or natural activities. Forests are emitting large number of chemicals in the atmosphere. And Africa has its large, very large continent, which has different climatologies, and then different, I would say, air pollution issues, which could be different from each other. When from North Africa to the south, we have different type of chemical composition of the air. So, and Africa is missing, and it's the less investigated continent with this regard. And so there is, and African populations are impacted by these issues. If I can cite a number, one of the numbers just related to air pollution, and there is something like more than 1 million deaths every year in Africa due to air pollution. So looking into this and trying to find solution, help this population to be somehow protected from this impact would be big challenge for us, I mean scientists, atmospheric research scientists. So this is short introduction to my talk.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Maluki, for stressing again the atmospheric or air pollution and I would say issues in Morocco and then the rest of Africa. So I will move now to Dr. Eduardo and see how these things, of course, atmospheric pollution and others probably linked to human, I would say, health issues. Please.
So good morning, everyone. So thanks for the introduction. So from my perspective, so I'm also related to my interest, research interest. I'm more focused on human health and especially also on data analysis, so data integration. I think this is also a very important aspect to consider when we want to integrate so different fields. And we can think to have very different types of data. For example, also if we are looking at the biodiversity, as in the very nice presentation, so we can represent biodiversity in different ways, different type of data, different environments with also different levels of resolution of complexity. And so I would say that it's very, at the end, challenging now, try to put all together, having something very standardized that can be really used to do also analysis in a One Health perspective.
Well, thank you so much. We'll come back, of course, to data in relation to the microbiome and all that stuff, later on. Well, let's move to Dr. Sibi Shakir. And of course, from your perspective as a water specialist, so how do you see this interconnectivity and, in relation to your area of expertise?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Professor Bouhsini. So maybe for this One Health, framework, this general framework, I think that what we're witnessing, we still have, missing a clear vision and a strategy that will lead us to that vision within this One Health framework. Another thing is that we're addressing the issues, bits and pieces here and there from different perspectives. What needs to be, I think that, because he said that something urgent that needs to be done, I think that we need to kind of interconnect these silos and then try to incentivize people, decision makers, us researchers and scientists to go with this transdisciplinarity and multidisciplinarity to bridge these different silos. And for that, I think that we need to have a proper governance scheme that will enable this, that smoothen this transfer. Like the colleague have said, I think that data management, the data sharing, this is very important. You need a great deal of trust for all these players will intervene. I think this, from my perspective, this is from where we can tackle.
Well, that's excellent suggestion, that's great. And so basically this is the goal when we launched the One Health initiative at UM6P, that basically to break the silos and this to have this multidisciplinarity across, I would say, the campus and hopefully across all the different disciplines in Morocco and Africa. Because I don't think this One Health approach will be successful unless all the different components, different pieces are put together and interconnected properly. Professor Juan, so what would you say about this general question about interconnectivity and all that?
Thank you so much, Professor Bouhsini, and I'm just delighted to be here with all the respected and honorable colleagues representing different aspects of the human, animal, and environment. And as a soil scientist, what I would say is that we need to show how our various disciplines are connected to the human beings, because, for instance, let's take soil. Probably 95% of all the food we eat in the world is produced in the soil. So therefore, the soil as a repository for food production, as well as a filter for the environment, for the buffering the water and cleaning the water and purifying it, as well as buffering pollutants that may be in the atmosphere, serves a very vital function. So I come back to questions of connectivity, but also we need to have the capacity to recognize how the data and how the information from this system gets coordinated so that we understand it in the perspective of what it means to human beings. One Health does go back to what humans will take from it. And so we really need to build that capacity so that people have a common language and understanding of all of our roles in this great endeavor. Thank you.
Great, Professor Juan. Dr. Rashabi, so what would you add to what just Professor Juan and others have said? I think it's working. Let's go ahead. That's great.
So thank you very much, Professor Bouhsini, to be here and for this nice session. And really, the majority of things has been said. But one thing I would really try to highlight and stress here with respect to the vocabulary, with the interconnectivity, which is the specifically under the concept of global change, because everything is interconnected. And when the fact is everything is interconnected, we have the side effect. And these side effects are, or responses of this global change, are quite different from one place to other. Has been shown in the literature that the responses is not equally the same, and there is a different level. So the question is here, do we need a magic recipe that fits to everybody, or we need to really stress what we call, or take into consideration the site-specific and adapt all the problems to a site and not come in with a magic recipe that would fit to everybody. And I think this is the big problem we have, is that the responses of this system globally are different from one. The taping point that has been stressed by Dr. Jolie, that is a fact, but this taping point is not in the same everywhere. Some of the areas already reaching what we call the critical level. Some of the area, if we do not do the right things right now, we will really reach this problem. And for my base discipline and the biogeochemical cycle, soil science adjuvant, I think that this soil, as I said last week in different discussion, should be the center of the system, because everything is coming from the soil and controlled by the soil and driven by the soil. So everything is affected to the soil will have a side effect, and side effect not only on human being but also biodiversity itself.
Thank you so much, Professor Shabi, for stressing the specificity of systems and no solution. No solution for all. So that's adaptability. I know I was at your seminar last week. So you did stress, this. He was talking about conservation agriculture, by the way, but he was talking about really specificity and all that. You cannot really use it in all the systems. Back to you, Dr. Ghani. So what would you say about this, again, this introductory question about interconnectivity? Whether it's a must thing to have, really to have this one health approach successful?
I think all the past comments are really useful, and I think we are at a stage where One Health has been conceptualized. It's being mainstreamed in various universities, in various, not yet at the institutional level. It's very difficult to embed it into institutions at a national level. So our approach is to actually deploy the One Health approach at a landscape level, regional level. Because what you were saying, to get people to work together, is very difficult. And people need to get their teeth into something, practically, and implement, operationalize that One Health approach. And at a national level, you can remain in framework and in difficulties and having people to work together. But if you get your teeth into deploying the approach to regenerate, restore, and bring in all the stakeholders, especially businesses around the table in a region, small or large, then you can really get people to work together, because they will overcome their differences, because they will have a common vision for that region or for that landscape.
Well, that's an excellent suggestion, really, so I would say a strategy how to implement. Well, this is based on your experience, of course, long experience on this One Health approach. So basically, strategically, how we should implement the One Health, probably start at the region and then hopefully move at the national level. Believe me, in the morning when I was thinking about how to would be moderating this session, I said, I wonder, because I can tell you how this committee, basically panel, was composed. We have from human to animal health to water, soil, air. And then I said, well, from where to start? And seriously, if you say, Professor Shabi was saying, soil basically is everything. And I'm sure in CB would say, well, water is life, etc. And then Professor Maluki would say, well, air, if you don't have clean air, then you cannot breathe, then you're you're dead. Anyhow, I was struggling, you know, but I will start. I will, CV. I would just say, again, it's a random way of kick off the discussion, but not because of, I know all the areas, again, interconnectivity, everything is important, but let's start with water. In the Moroccan context of rising water scarcity, of course, reusing treated wastewater is becoming essential, it's a necessity. I mean, at least in Morocco now. So how can this be expanded while protecting soil quality, crop safety, public health within a One Health framework?
Well, sure. Thanks a lot, Professor Bassini. Well, first of all, I won't consider it as a random choice. So, for this perspective, I think that I'll give it maybe a bit of context. So, like we've all known, unfortunately, we went through basically 6 or 7 years of consecutive droughts in Morocco, and just talking about what can make people's mind change. When I came first here, that was in 2019, I was pushing for to basically unlock all the potential from this treated wastewater for agricultural use, not just for green spaces and the conventional way. But there was, for obvious reasons, and from a One Health perspective, there was, quite challenging, especially from legislation and everything. But through this drought season, you can feel the people, decision makers, even the farmers at the farm scale, that are now conceiving the whole thing from another perspective. I've been privileged to go to the House region that was struck by the unfortunate earthquake. And the people there are now seriously considering reusing treated wastewater to irrigate their crops. So there's a mindset change, basically pushed with the experience of the drought, this consecutive years of drought. Now, from One Health perspective, reusing this treated wastewater is challenging, as you know. So although for us, just to go back to what Dr. Julia said, we're taking basically water from nature, from seawater, from surface water, from groundwater, and then we use it either in industry or even in our own households, and then we discharge it polluted. So there are conventional pollution that goes into what we call the wastewater treatment plants. So these are basically the barriers that we humans do to remove the pollutants before discharging the water into the water bodies, into the rivers. But the problem is these infrastructure, they cannot deal with what we call the emerging pollutants. So we end up with a new kind of pollutants, PFAS, heavy metals, PFAS and nanoplastics, endocrine disrupting compounds, lots of nasty chemicals that go through this last barrier, and then they contaminate the water bodies, and from there they can go to contaminate the soil, if they're going to be used for irrigation, and the whole food chain. Maybe I'll take one example of these emerging pollutants, which are the microplastics or nanoplastics. So these emerging pollutants, unfortunately, the existing wastewater treatment plants cannot properly deal with those kind of pollutants. So we end up having them in water bodies, and unfortunately, there are many discoveries. They found this nanoplastics and microplastics in groundwaters, in fish species, in animals. So that's quite disturbing, especially from a health perspective. And for us, we need to tackle this not only from a technological perspective, because the technologies, they do exist, but the problem is to make them economically viable. I think this is also another challenge for us, is to make, propose technologies that are cost effective to tackle these pollution issues and try to block the pollution going into the water bodies and impacting the soils and agriculture and so on.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Shakir, for pointing out, of course, to some of the issues related to water treatment. And then you just mentioned at the end the microplastic. I would say it's a big issue now, I would say, in agriculture. You know, basically contaminating the soils, and that's a good introduction to our soil scientist. Let's start with you, Professor Shabi. And talking about lit soil now, since more than, you said it, probably 95% of the world food comes from soil. How important are supplement and fertilizing materials for producing nutrients, food for animals and people? Are there any protocols or precautions to follow when using soil amendments to protect human and environmental health?
Okay, thank you very much. Let me go to the issues of the reuse, what we call the reuse, treated wastewater treatment, and then use them in agriculture. So the first thing that is, not only in Africa, but also in worldwide, specifically in Europe, and this is a question of resistance or acceptability of the people, because it is, for example, a country like France or Europe, the reuse is less than 1%. The second thing is that even we have to go later or now to use or the reuse of the wastewater treatment in agriculture, there is another big problem in which you highlight some of the issues, specifically the plastic, but not only the plastic PFAS, but it's another big problem, which is the medicament or for example, cancer disease treatment, all those small molecules that we are right now not able to avoid them when we release this treated water to the rivers and all of this thing. And the fact, because all of this thing we don't know the consequences, what will happen on the soil, because we cannot spread them in the soil, and then probably we will change the biodiversity. We're talking about the biodiversity. We have another issue, what we call the bioresistance of these things in the system. And this is, we can do it. We have the technology to do that. But the cost of the 1 cubic meter will be extremely high. The only country doing it right now in Europe, they're using 100% of this is in Switzerland, but who is able to pay for 1 cubic meter the amount of money that it used, for example, or the technique used in Switzerland, because the costs will be very, very high. So what we do is now is to have some applicability, some cost effective, and we put them once after the treatment, put them in the river, and we think that the self-sustained system that the river will do, or the lake or other thing will do the same thing. We are trying now in a big project, funded by Europe, and in some of the area to use the wastewater treatment in agriculture and to see what happens, not specifically because once the water is coming now for all the factories of the treatment in Europe are somehow clean. We have the primary treatment, secondary and third, but what we are facing is that the microbial resistance and the medicament treatment, and we will see at what extent the soil, not at the laboratory level, but at the real world, how this microbe will be captured by the absorption of the soil, but not the soil will do the same job, because we have the texture issue, and then because the texture issue, every soil will react differently, and every species will react differently. So again and again, I am very convinced that magic recipe will never work. Or doesn't exist, I would say, and we have to have specificity, site use specificity, but all human using all of these things. So I think we have to be very careful when we're applying something to a system, and we think that it will be something that will work for everybody. But coming again to the Africa, because this is the water, specifically in Morocco, we have to move in these directions. I mean, somehow we have, because we have 1 million meter cube, I'm not going to say a number, how much of this water is really released to the nature without reusing this again. But we have to use some of the things some techniques that allow us to use this in agriculture, but also not only the agriculture, because if you are talking in the countries, in the smallholder farmers, all of these things, they have this not connectivity to the use. They don't have the capacity to use this water. So we need to build them some of the places in which they can use. We think about the constructed wetlands, for example. Constructed wetlands, very, very important. It's cost effective, but also can help them to use this water, but also for many purposes, specifically in agriculture.
Thank you so much, Professor Sabi. We do, of course, recognize that it's a rare resource. Basically water, very important. That's life. And we need to reuse it. We don't want to waste any drop of it. But again, the cost of technology. So this is where research, I think, should play a role. And so that, everything should be affordable for farmers and users, so it will not be costly really. But the most important thing is to have really clean, safe water. So what you add to that, Professor Juan, because this is in your area?
Yes, this is a great discussion in connecting the water and the wastewater reuse and so on. And I may say that in addition to the care that we have to take with water use in agricultural soils, the other thing that we do often is we have some types of fertilizers and organic materials that we recycle in the agricultural soils. And I just want to assure the audience that in fact, agronomists and soil scientists working with these materials have quite strict protocols. We have very strict protocols on the safety of those issues, on the amounts that can be applied, and we take what's called a nutrient stewardship approach in which we put just the amount that's needed for the soil. So this is a kind of capacity building that we do out in the environment. Many of you may have heard of something called 4R. That's a kind of nutrient stewardship approach, but it's widely promoted in all of our teaching and in all of our industry to make people aware that we're working with the nature. We are working to provide those, say, micronutrients or other nutrients that are not in abundant supply in the soil, and that we need to make a balanced and nutritious food so that the people eating it are very well and that they don't suffer from any sort of nutrient deficiencies. But we do it in a very careful stewardship approach. So we'd like to encourage that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Juan, again, for stressing this. Basically, just add what's needed, whether it's fertilizer, whether it's pesticide, whether it's water, of course. Let's put what's really your system, I would say, needs. So let's move now to Professor Eduardo Pazzoli. So to see the link, of course, we're talking about clean water, healthy soil, and all that. And let's move to see how we can develop interoperable data systems that connect human health, animal health, environmental monitoring, and agricultural data to facilitate early detection and emerging risk and support evidence-based One Health decision making.
Yeah. I'm coming more from the human field, and I would say that now is very challenging to put together data coming from different fields if we want to move to a real true One Health perspective, also in terms of potentialities in also analyzing the data. For example, you were mentioning also the plastics, so that is a very relevant question. Field of interest for soil, for environmental, but for example, now there is also a lot of discussion on how this can, for example, have an impact on human health. If we have microplastic in the food, and so. But and so it is important, for example, the knowledge that maybe we acquire from this very specific topic, for example, from the soil, we can translate, for example, in the human, but then it is difficult, challenging when we want to do this in terms of data analysis, because at the end it's very difficult to find also resources, databases that link these very different fields. But now, there is big opportunities since the last few years. Big developments in terms also of computational infrastructures and technologies, also to standardize data. So I think this can be very, very in the next few years. I expect that can get big advancements in taking advantage of the integration, I would say, of data coming from different fields.
Well, that's good. I think that's to me that's you have a centralized data coming from different disciplines and all that, filtering and all that. So that would help really predict and all that emergent disease and all that. Now, let me move to my neighbor, Professor Dr. Garnier, and I'll go back to this biodiversity. So why has biodiversity, in your opinion, stayed on the sideline in decision making until now? Even though we know it's the heart of the foundation, basically not only one health, but everything of life, I would say.
Yes, thank you for. I think it's a crucial question. We always try to go back to the root. If we want to address a problem, we need to go back to understand its root. And I think still now you can see that biodiversity is not considered as being the foundation to life, to the systems we live in. I think when we go back to businesses, it's also because they were they've always considered it as an externality, as a nice to have, as not embedding it in a systemic approach. And I think also it's that siloed approach that we've had in all our trainings. We were a panel of scientists from various backgrounds. And before, I remember even 15 years ago, I was talking about biodiversity and people were just saying, what does it entail? And still, it was like embedded only in environmental science, or even in my vet studies, it was barely touched upon. We talked about the diversity of breeds, livestock breeds, but wildlife was not an issue. I remember during my studies, people were telling me, well, there is no future in wildlife businesses and health. So I think it's our siloed approach. It's also our going back to our, that siloed approach has been embedded into training, into institutions, into businesses, that lack of systemic approach, and I think wanting hierarchy as well. There has always been a hierarchy in the sort of scientific professions, and the environmental science are always coming sort of at the bottom of it. And I think now, we need to level up and integrate all these different types of knowledge, and also recognize, the stewards of biodiversity, integrate traditional knowledge. So I think it's a combination of things. And now that we know the root causes of these problems, we can address them, but we need to do that very quickly now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Garnier. I don't know whether Professor Katali is still here, because he will love, indigenous knowledge and all that you have to have that into consideration in everything. So probably you need to have some discussion with him. So he loves that. We just heard a talk from him a couple of days ago about that. Now, Professor Maluki. So I would say air pollution definitely will affect biodiversity, will affect everything. So how can the One Health approach, in your opinion, help tackle the effect of air pollution on human, animal, and the ecosystem? By the way, I'm sure if you have a polluted air, I mean, in my opinion, everything would, I'm afraid that systems might collapse.
Yeah, I agree with you. Air is very important. And we have to save our pure air somehow. If you live in Ben Guerir, sometimes in the morning when you wake up in the morning and even the evening, sometimes you have some smell, which is really nasty smell. So this is, I think, maybe it's coming from the landfill, which is nearby. We have some ideas what emissions are from that landfill, but we don't really know what's the composition, what's coming there. We smell something, that means that there is something, some chemicals coming. So I'm really sad not to be able to detect and see what these species are. And I really deeply think that UM6P has to do something about this, at least check what is in the air, what we are breathing. So this is one thing I wanted to say. But so let me come back to this One Health and air pollution. I think One Health is really provide the comprehensive framework for air pollution, and air pollution is really linked to all the domains you have been talking about. It impacts humans, animals, and ecosystems. Now that in the 50s, it was something like 70 years ago in Los Angeles, and the way that's where the investigation on photochemical smog were conducted at the time mainly by looking at the plants, so looking at the changes of the plants, how they behave with the air. So sometimes some colleagues were putting some type of plants in different places and see how they behave, how they change. And repeating the experiments in the lab, putting these same plants in the chambers, atmospheric simulation chambers, and add some chemicals and see if they behave the same way or not. So this is the plants were used as biomarkers at that time, and still they are used in different places to check the concentration of ozone, particle, and something like that, other pollutants. So there is really impact connections between the plants and air composition, air pollution. Then coming to the soil. Soil is very important, of course. And so then, while using fertilizers, so on, you could have emissions. You have emissions of a large number of species, chemicals, particles, gases. So with recent papers showing that in some places, mostly in California, emission of NOx, nitrogen oxides, were very high, and they can compete at some stage with anthropogenic emissions, with the emissions from cars. So this will be depending on the soils, the nature of the soils, and the fertilizer we are using. Talking about fertilizers and soils also, there is large emissions of ammonia. Yeah, we are talking a lot about ammonia when thinking about the energy, new energies. Ammonia is very good and so on. But are we thinking about the impacts of ammonia on the ecosystems, on air? This is very known for atmospheric scientists. Ammonia in the atmosphere leads to the particles, PM 2.5 and so on. And this is the most important alkaline species chemicals in the atmosphere. So observing, measuring, monitoring all these species is really important while developing studies on soils and plants and so on. We have to have this side of science next to, to the other domains. So it's really important to go further and link all domains, and this is One Health can do it, links all these domains together.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Meluki, for really, I would say, giving three examples of interconnectivity of all the system from soil to air to, and it was nice to know that people are using plant as markers, to see how they behave under different pollution level, I would say. That's again, affecting, I would say, related to biodiversity, so that's great. And it's nice to let you know that we have now a center dealing with air pollution, and that's led by our colleague Professor Miloki. That's a very important, I would say, center created recently, a couple of years ago, I would say, at the university. So this is great. Probably we'll have another round of discussion. We'll stop at exactly 11:15, so that's 1 hour, because we have still 2 more presentations this morning. Professor CV, back to water. So how can Morocco utilize nature-based solutions and innovative water treatment technologies to lower contamination risks while promoting resilient ecosystems and protecting the health of communities, livestock, and biodiversity? Again, so thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Professor Bassini. I think this is also very important within this One Health framework. I think that Professor Shebe already mentioned about these constructed wetlands. So this is the kind of nature-based solutions that we need to basically to implement throughout the rural landscape. Let's put it that way. So what I've talked about in my first reply, that's basically for cities, for big cities and the like. For the nature-based solutions that can be applied basically within special locations within cities, but it's much more more prone for applications in rural and remote regions. And this is also very important to be inclusive, to have this equity dimension to our effort. As you know, I think that in Morocco, I think still 30% of the population is still living in rural regions. So we need to cater for them too, in terms of water management, in terms of basically water supply, but also water treatment and sanitation and everywhere. And this kind of nature-based solutions, the good thing is that they're very fitting within this One Health dimension, is that we use basically every location, every village will basically leverage on the resources, the biological resources that are located in there. So that's one dimension. Also, relatively speaking, these are more user-friendly technologies. So ideally is that we conceive these water treatment systems, decentralized water treatment systems, in collaboration with the people there in the village and afterwards they're going to be autonomous to run their system on their own, to replenish it, to retrofit it, to resize it if the village gets bigger. And this is, I think, this is very important. And another dimension is is valid for urban, but also for rural regions, that we need also to push for this within this One Health framework, this circular economy principles. I think they need to be embedded right from the beginning, so that people, for instance, usually for this cost effectiveness, ideally with the circular economy, this need to be designed, or basically for the existing infrastructure to be retrofitted, so they can valorize side products, commercial ones that can be basically sold, and then for the income, it will be basically re-put into the system to retrofit it or to improve its efficiency. I think that's a very relevant paradigm or set of principles that needs to be considered in this general framework.
Excellent, Professor Shakir, and to have this nature-based solutions. And again, back to Qatar's thanks, so it's indigenous, probably this will be based on indigenous knowledge, involving the communities as well, rural communities, and how they have been doing things, and to improve what they have been doing probably, and take advantage of their knowledge. That's great. So now let's move to our Professor Juan, and So from microbial processes to societal outcomes, how much can advances in microbiome science govern soils, plant, animals, and humans be translated into practical strategies for improving nutrition, reducing disease risks, and strengthen ecosystem resilience? And that's basically One Health.
Well, thank you so much for giving us soil scientists an opportunity to speak for the whole realm of soil health. But we do have one feature in common, and it is going back to the biodiversity perspective. As you know, the majority of the biodiversity on Earth is bacterial. After that is the archaea. So basically the prokaryotes are the most diverse organisms on the planet, and we hardly know them. They are microscopic, we don't see them. But however, they form at least half of our bodies, and the same for all other animals, and they are associated very much with plants, and they're in the water and they're in the air. So I think we have some elements of biodiversity that maybe we overlook because they are almost invisible to us, but let us consider that as a kind of theme. And some of the features of biodiversity that I might suggest that we concentrate on are the emergence of these antibiotic resistance genes that we notice in soils as well as in plant and animal and human systems. This is something that is responding to environmental pollution from the air and from the water that enters into the soil system. So I think that some features of biodiversity, not only cataloging it, but also looking at its functionality and its responses to environmental stressors is going to be quite critical for us to make those connections between all the various components we just talked about. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Professor Shabi. Why don't you continue on the same
I
microbiome soil?
think that Professor Juan said everything. The one important things we have been talking sometimes about the erosion of biodiversity. What will happen if we lose the biodiversity? But some things is we are losing this biodiversity in soil. But the problem that we need to catch up is that what we call the redundancy. Do the remain of the bacteria that remain do the same job that the ones that we lost? What are the connectives? Who will take over? And it was a big issue. It was a discussion project going on, difficult to put in experimentation, empiric experimentation to see if we dilute the erosion, if we simulate the erosion of the biodiversity, what will happen in terms of function? Because not the question of the biodiversity itself, is the question that they are performed, is the function, what they do in carbon cycle, what they do for nutrient cycle, what they do for the human and everything. So this is the thing. And once we capture all of these functional things, we understand how to manipulate them. We understand how to put them in our discussion. But the question is, again and again, this redundancy. Who is doing what? How they are affected by the pressure? How they are, or adaptation? Because I don't think that the adaptation and acclimatization is a question of vocabulary use, but I think it's how they adapt faster, slower, or maybe it is a kind of inertia. They will react 30, 20 or 50 years later, and we see all the consequences that comes in late.
Great, Dr. Sabi, and for again stressing basically we need to keep soil healthy, soil alive. Otherwise, because we need to look at the soil as a live thing, Imagine the billions of microbes, wireworms and all that, Otherwise, again, if it is dead, you pour water on it, you pour whatever, you put whatever improved seed, nothing will happen. To me, that's the foundation. So thanks for stressing that. Let me go back to our Professor Eduardo Pazzoli, and then on this microbiome, how can advances in microbiome science help us better understand the interconnected effects of pollution, land use, agriculture, and human health, and turn this knowledge into practical solutions at various levels?
Yeah, so starting again from the concept of also biodiversity is also quite interesting, to see that also in the human. I mean, if you are looking at the human microbiome, we see a decrease of the biodiversity that we see in the for example, in the gut microbiome from what you can associate to more industrialized population. So due to the effect, and so, but it's still not. I mean, we know that there are multiple factors, but it is not clear still which are the main drivers. And so here again is a good. Link with all the different fields, because it can be related, of course, to the diet. I mean, with a bad diet that we have, but we can also link it to the food. I mean, to specific foods, chemicals in the food, and also in general to environmental factors. And also in this case, for example, the pollution. So environmental factors. Is another important thing. So actually came in mind, for example, a collaboration that I did 2-3 years ago, in which we saw the effect of different pollution levels in different regions in Italy, that the link with the microbial composition in the human gut. So it is. Again, there is a good example of connections among fields, and so microorganisms are everywhere, and so it is also also interesting, and also good opportunities also to try to link the transmission also of the different microbes strains among different environments.
Well, excellent, Dr. Eduardo. And then again, stressing the role of microbiome in the guts for human or animals in general. So that's great. So again, that's biodiversity. That's so. Back to you, Professor Garnier. So I would say, so how can, again, taking into consideration what you've heard about biodiversity, about within microbiome or plants, etc. So how can businesses incorporate biodiversity, focus on health without sacrificing profits, basically?
Thank you. It's. I think I might reframe the questions. How can they not integrate biodiversity now in their strategy? Actually, I would like them to now think along these lines, because it's, as I said, it's a business risk not to integrate it. It's a financial risk. And I think to integrate that fundamental aspect, I think going back to adopting a common vision, acknowledging the risks, so measuring the risks. I think, businesses work in terms of KPI, but also adopting new models of economy. I think if we're talking about circular economy, that becomes a natural, because you adopt a systemic approach. So I think the first step is to rethink the model, the economic model. But again, it takes time, as I was showing, when you want to adopt an innovation and adopt transformative change, it takes time. So it needs to be first embedded into their thinking. That means they need to adopt system thinking first. So then we need to paradigm shift. And you need to work on all fronts, working with collaborators, working with obviously the CEOs, working with the boards. So I think working at all levels and demonstrating the benefits of including biodiversity, all the impacts, all the positive impacts it will have. And I think also showing all the risks, associated with not considering that risk. And I think the balance becomes very clear. If you don't incorporate it, well, your business, apart from your life, is very much at risk. So once you embed it, it's fairly clear. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Garnier, for really stressing the work in earlier you say the different levels, different partners, of course, and then also at region level, and then move to national, and then also with different partners at different levels of the society, otherwise nothing will happen. Now, let me ask you this question. I will start with Professor Miluki because I didn't give him the second round, but the last, I would say, quick, because we need to stop in 10 minutes from now, a few minutes each. So how, this is a question to everybody, how to implement One Health across these different silos, because we have silos basically, different areas. We have, soil, we have air, we have water, we have this, we have that. But how do you see, how do you think we should implement this One Health across these different, basically, disciplines or silos, I would say?
Yeah, I think that we need to do it within the university. First, we have all the opportunities to do it here and expand it a little bit more later on in the Moroccan context, in the African context, and so on. So we have different teams, right? And I think we could do it through common project. And we are, as ARCARE, developing projects with colleagues from medicine, Faculty of Medicine, FMS. We have submitted projects, proposal to different institutions. We are working on submitting project to proposal to European Union. So, and this is somehow having common proposals, projects, having students working in different departments, complementary departments. I think this is one of the best way to enhance these activities and go beyond. And I think we have a lot of chance to succeed in that.
Thank you so much, Professor Miluki, for really stressing the education part of it. Project, I would say, joint proposals across different areas and having students, etc. Professor Shabi.
Yeah, I think that the great success will be the collaboration. I think we have to break down all of this barrier and to communicate. We have to share the science. And then the science, not only discussion, as we are doing here, we have to put it from practice from theories to practice. And the most important things, I didn't stop to say it, we have to share the data. The data must be accessible. The data must be shared by everybody. And when we share the data, we will have really the good science to do, but only the good science in terms of discipline, but in terms of integration and projection and perspectives and opening a new horizon for new research. This is very important. Once we block these things, we will have pieces of knowledge. So the data accessibility, it is a big issue, and this university must do everything to have these things in access.
Thank you so much, Professor Sabi, for stressing the collaboration and then also the data. I'm sure, I don't know whether Professor Bruno Girard is still here, but I'm sure he would like, to hear about the data, accessibility and all that, so probably you need to talk to him about this open access data that will be, launched soon at UM6P with BCG and NutriCrops. Professor Rizwan.
Well, thank you. And I'm going to take a slightly different tact than my colleagues because I think there is some very high-level organizations that can be very helpful. And in fact, there are some global treaties that are on One Health. But the question comes of whether they have focused on One Health from their own perspective. For instance, the WHO has a One Health global treaty, but it really ignores some of the environmental aspects. And there was another declaration, I believe it was done in Rio de Janeiro in 2024, that starts to get into climate change and the environment, but it doesn't perhaps treat them as deeply as they need to be treated. So I think if some more kind of unifying language can be used at a very international level, it filters down. At the same time, we can work from the bottom up. So, but I think the framing at the international level really does provide some guidance and make sure that we at local levels do not forget some important and key aspects of it. So that would be my recommendation.
Thank you so much. An excellent thing to have the policy, of course, at the national level. And so strategies and all that should really adopt, I would say, the One Health approach. Because I don't think nobody would mind to have santé pour tous, الصحة للجميع, one health. So that's for everybody. Professor Eduardo.
Yeah. So yeah, the multidisciplinary, of course, is very, very relevant, as you already introduced and discussed. The accessibility, reusability of data. But in terms of data, it is also important to note that it is true that we can put together data, maybe also global data, but at the same time we have that usually very peculiar characteristics that can be very, at local level, country level. I mean, also if you are, for example, I mean, I'm thinking about it in terms of microbiome. Okay, we have, at the end, very specific microbiomes. I mean, the human, but also for the food, for the soil, very specific to each country, continent, and so on. So it is also in this perspective, also having resources and building. Resources and also getting data from local at the national level, because this of course is very, very relevant to have also then solutions that can be applicable to a specific country. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor Eduardo. Again, multidisciplinarity, collaboration, and all that. Professor Nsibi.
Thanks, Professor Bassini. Thank you all, dear colleagues. I think that all the points are very relevant. For me, I think that there's the big elephant in the room, if I can pick one word, is trust. I think this is pivotal to ensure all these collaborations, all these data sharing, because you're going to have parties from different perspectives. You're going to have businessmen and businesswomen that they'll be much more profit-oriented. You're going to have environmentalists, so they are for nature, in nature. But I think that, to go back to what Wahid have said, I think that university can and need to play a pivotal role that will basically bring in all these parties. So you're going to have government bodies, you're going to have industry, you're going to have associations, and all involved parties, so we can provide them with science-based proofs that these interconnections are profitable, are good for the environment, and the most important thing is that it will ensure a real sustainable development for us, for our kids, and for our grandkids. I think this is pivotal. How we can do it, I think we need to show by example. If us at university, we can break all these silos and we can, show a genuine collaboration with real impact on the ground, I think this will be a great message for all involved parties. And the last point is that I think that we're privileged at UM6P to have this organic relationship with the OCP, with a big industrial player. I think this is also very important. One example, and going back to the trust thing, in circular economy, there is this concept of industrial symbiosis, where you have basically one facility, the waste or the side product from one plant will be the feedstock for the next one. So I think this also entitles great sharing of chemical compositions, of potential emissions of CO2 and other thing. And this is come again, it's not a weird thing, but most of the successful industrial symbiosis complexes are in Nordic countries, in Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Norway. And the logical link is that in those countries, the trust is a big thing from a cultural perspective. So just a thing to be think collectively.
Thank you so much for, again, stressing the stress and then, and the trust, I would say, not the stress, the trust. And then, of course, the role our university should play in leading the One Health approach. And in fact, they will be leading. We launched the initiative on the 30th of November, and we are really moving, I would say, a little bit fast than what we expected, originally planned. And of course, education is very important. We will be launching, starting a course in September on One Health across the university. We'll be organizing executive training for different, of course, I would say, organizations in the country and probably in Africa. So I think education should be, again, the foundation probably for moving forward with the One Health. Dr. Garnier, we have a saying in Arabic, it says, ختام مسك, or not a saying, but so ختام مسك, that's the end is really the sweeter, or so this is, you're the last to, yeah.
Yeah, I think all what our colleagues here have said is, if you put all these elements together, you know, to me, building trust is fundamental. I think it takes time, but once you've broken the barriers, then you break the barriers of confidence and trust. Then the silos also, you know, collapse. And I think getting your teeth into a common project, which is embedded into something that everybody care for, everybody can relate to, but also that is a fundamental project, a fundamental challenge to address, or a fundamental region. I like to talk about biocultural heritage because also we know that nature is related to the culture and they allow to protect one another. So yeah, deploying the approach, as I said, at the landscape level, which is meaningful culturally as well. Trust building, bringing the institutions, bottom-up and top-down approach are important. And also, you know, breaking the silos and having education and institution like UM6P at the core are fundamental. So all of these are so relevant and meaningful and important now to do. And once it's done, you can replicate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think it's a good statement. I would say you need to show to be the role model, I would say, for the rest of the country and hopefully Africa. So an institution has to lead so that and then show impact on the ground so that it's working. Yeah, that's well. Let me thank you so much and for this wonderful discussion. We're exactly on time. Please join me to warmly thank our panelists today. Well, excellent. So we'll move now to have two more exciting, I would say, presentations. The next presentation will be by Professor Nada Ben Ajiba. He's a nutrition scientist and public health expert affiliated with the International University of Rabat with over 100 publications. Her work focuses on nutrition, health promotion, and capacity building across Africa and the Arab region. So she will talk to us about hidden hunger, key figures, and control strategies. And you see, nutrition has to be a pillar of the One Health, of course, approach. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. It's my privilege to stand before you today to talk or to discuss about a pervasive but yet invisible challenge in our time of today, which is the hidden hunger. So I'm going to talk to you about key figures and control strategies. I'm presenting on behalf of my mentor, Professor Hassan Agnam, and myself. Let me start with this reflection that sets the tone for our discussion. And hidden hunger doesn't just starve the stomach, it weakens nations. Fighting micronutrient deficiencies strengthens the future, and biofortification is one of the most promising keys to achieving this. So we need to consider that nutrition is not something luxury, it is not just humanitarian, but it is something really strategic. And you can see with me here that through the different stages of a life cycle, nutrition plays an important role. Like, for example, for children, they thrive. For teenagers, they can achieve higher education. For adult people, they can have better income. And this is a cycle that continues on. So, what is malnutrition? We do traditionally think that malnutrition is related of insufficient food, but it is actually the imbalance between the nutrient that the body needs and the nutrient that the body receives, and the difference between the two. So we do have two big categories of malnutrition: undernutrition, when there is not enough food nutrient, and overnutrition, where there is excess of calories consumption. So within the malnutrition, we have several types, the one that affects young children and the one that affects adult people. But our focus today is the hidden hunger. So the hidden hunger actually is the micronutrient deficiency. And this is something that we cannot see on people while the body is suffering from inside. It can be the deficiency of essential vitamins such as vitamin A, D, K, E, and it can also be deficiency in minerals, mainly iron deficiency, iodine, zinc, copper, magnesium, calcium, and on. The fact is, the hidden hunger is usually not in isolation. We can witness iron deficiency anemia in the presence of other deficiencies, undernutrition, but also obese and overweight people can have one or other forms of iron or anemia or micronutrient deficiencies. That's why we talk about the tribal burden of malnutrition, which is a term referring to the coexistence of undernutrition, for example, stunning or wasting in children, micronutrient deficiencies such as, I have just mentioned, and overnutrition. And it can happen within the same individual, such as someone who is obese and suffering from vitamin D deficiency. Within the same household, like, for example, affecting differently members of the same family or within the same population, like, for example, in Morocco, we have obesity, overweight, and at the same time we have people suffering from, for example, vitamin E or iron deficiency. And it can also happen through the human life cycle at different stages. A child can be, for example, suffering from stunning under 5, but also when reaching the age of adult life, he can become an obese person. Then, this means that malnutrition is not a concern in poor countries only. Every country in the world is affected by one form of malnutrition. So what happens at international level? There are some global nutrition priorities, and the first one happened in 1992 in Rome. That was called the first International Conference of Nutrition. And here the focus or the underlying logic was that people were suffering because of lack of the food. There was not enough food available for everyone. Then, 2 decades later, in 2014, the second international conference took place in Rome, and even if there was some progress, we've noticed that hidden hunger was there. In addition to that, overweight, obesity, related diet, non-communicable diseases, and climate change. And this time, the underlying logic is nutrition outcomes does not only depend on the quantity, but also the way the food is produced, processed, distributed, and consumed. At political level, we all know the Millennium Development Goal. The era was 2015. It takes into account the nutrition, but the limitation that was stated was the hidden hunger was not taken into account and diet quality was not addressed. So in 2015, we had the Sustainable Development Goals. And out of the 17, 12 of them are either related directly or indirectly to nutrition, witnessing the importance of the recognition of nutrition as a key driver of development for human. And this time, the SDG logic was healthy diets from sustainable food system to development. So what about the statistics? Nowadays, 105 million children are still suffering from stunting, which is lower height compared to the age. 42 million are wasting, and in addition to the 35.5 million children are either obese or overweight. In terms of micronutrient deficiencies, 2 billion people suffer from these deficiencies, meaning that 1 out of 4 people on this earth is having one form of micronutrient deficiencies. Some quick statistic, this is the map of the iodine deficiency, and it is still prevalent, different prevalences across the world and continent. This is the vitamin E deficiency map. It is more prevalent, and this one is the iron deficiency map. So, why is it that important? What is the meaning of someone suffering from one or another form of micronutrient deficiency? So investing in nutrition actually helps saving lives and strengthening economies. This is the life cycle, and this is the consequences that we can notice in 3 different stages through the life cycle. For example, a pregnant woman, if she is suffering from one form of micronutrient deficiency, will give birth to children or babies who are low birth, and consequently the child will have limited mental capacity. As an adolescent, this individual will have limited capability of learning and consequently reduced productivity and increased risk of chronic diseases. And this person will become a frail elderly, and the vicious cycle continues. That's why the World Bank keeps remaining that malnutrition is one of the world's most serious but least addressed development challenges. It is human and economic costs are enormous, falling hardest on the poor, women, and the children. Here I'm having the hidden economic costs related to the hidden hunger. So these are the costs, the economic costs that are lost because of these micronutrient deficiencies. So up to 5% of the GDP can lose, and we can see, for example, on the iron deficiency, we have 0.57% of GDP in 10 developing countries is lost because of iron deficiency. It is not only a matter of cost of productivity, but in terms of treatment, someone who is affected by anemia, for example, needs 7,000 to 37,000 more money to treat this individual. And you can have several other aspects in there. So investing in nutrition, studies indicated that $1 invested in promoting nutrition among children is having an estimation of $18 returned in improving the nutrition and productivity. And this can be seen in terms of schooling, in terms of earning. There is an increase 5 to 50% wages. It reduces poverty and it improves economy. Okay, solutions? Yes, there are many solutions, and we are going to emphasize more on biofortification as a game changer. Okay, why? We have to know that about 95% of our food comes from soils, and soils are critical for feeding the world, providing safe and nutritious food, and sustaining life Earth. And here we have the different approaches. The three ones on the left are the traditional approaches, and on the right side we have the biofortification, which is deliberately enhancing the nutrient levels in soils that will be that's going to be go across the crops. So, nutritionally talking, and studies have shown that this biofortification is recognized as a nutrition-sensitive agriculture intervention that can reduce vitamin and mineral deficiencies in population. I will be joining here the One Health concept, and you can see with me this figure that demonstrates the influence of mineral micronutrient fortification on the plant and physiological processes and its relationship for the human health and immunity. And there are different aspects, there are different processes that can enhance through this biofortification. Are there any studies? Is there any confirmation? Of course, growing body of efficacy and effectiveness evidence supports the biofortification as a viable strategy to improve micronutrient status among the population. So, I'm bringing you back to my first statement, and yes, hidden hunger doesn't just starve the stomach, it weakens nation, and fighting micronutrient deficiency strengthens the future, and biofortification is one of the most promising key to achieving this. The question now, are we ready? Shall we embrace a change? As Albert Einstein says, that if we always do the same thing, we shouldn't expect to find a different result. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Nada, for this wonderful presentation, stressing the role of really nutrition in the whole, I would say, thing. Now, I just to let you know that this presentation is part for colleagues from Nutri-Crops. It's great to know that OCP has adopted One Health as a strategic pillar. And then, of course, OCP has, Nutri-Crops has a business unit on nutrition, which is really great. So you see that the importance given by OCP to really nutrition and to One Health, basically, system that's really wonderful. And we will be UM6P and Nutri-Crops will be working together toward, implementing One Health, I would say, at the country level, inshallah, in Africa as well. Now, let me move to the last presentation. Sorry, we will not have break because we started late. We'll have the last presentation and then, go for lunch. And before some of you leave, we do have an exciting afternoon session designed by students in the afternoon, starting from 2 o'clock. That's, I don't want you to miss that. I really don't know what they are going to show us, but it must be a wonderful program in the afternoon. Now, last presentation by our colleague, Professor Eduardo Mazzoli, and he is an associate professor at the University of Naples. His research uses advanced computation methods to study microbiome and its links to human health and sustainable food systems. So the title of his presentation is Train Resolved Metagenomics Across Human and Food Microbiome Insights from a One Health Perspective. Professor Mazzoli.
Okay, so good morning everyone again. And thanks a lot for the introduction and for the opportunity given to me. what I wanted to show some of my main research interest on microbiome, and so what I tried to focus on my presentation is on the multidisciplinary aspect of this field. So I'm coming from a computational background, so from computer science, but it is now a few years that I moved also to a more application-oriented. At the same time, I'm more focused on the human, so it's also what you have in the presentation, but also here I'm now working on the food and also in other environments. So I try to summarize for me the main important things when we want to move across different fields. So in the title, so you saw some keywords. Maybe you are not familiar now, but I want to tell you what are, I would say, the main things that I want to try to cover in this presentation. So, is to introduce to the metagenomics, in particular what we have we define with strain level metagenomics, and how this is important in One Health context. Then I want to show some examples also on the thing that, okay, usually we don't have a single approach, a single strategy that works for everything, but is usually required to have the appropriate workflow, the appropriate data analysis, also based on the question, the research question, and finally to see how we can move to strain resolve it to more policy cases. So the outline. So I have a very quick introduction about microbiome metagenomics, and then I would say I focus on three main aspects. So that we will see the machine learning, the strain resolve metagenomics, and then the link between human and the food microbiomes. Probably you are all very familiar with this topic, but just to clarify a few things. So if we start from the human microbiome, so we can think as the ecological community of microorganisms that live in our body. So the concept of microbiome is not something new, but actually for several years, most of the research, if you go in the past, was focused just on the pathogenic microorganisms that can give you infections. And so it's very important to understand in a very short time, but there is still a big diversity, a community of commensal microorganisms. But at the same time, they can also become opportunistic pathogens and so on, and so this can have an impact at the end on the human health. So when we study the microbiome, we usually want to understand first. So who is there? So which are the microorganisms that are there? But this, I would say, is just the first step. The second one is to try to also to understand which are the functions associated with this community. So my talk will be mainly focused on the prokaryotic part, so the bacteria, since at the end this is the majority of our community, and it is I would say the main focus of what you can find, and especially the gut microbiome. Also, because this is the most relevant for the human health, and with the highest biomass. But we have also to think that there are also other type of microorganisms that live in us. We have viruses. We have also microeukaryotes. For different reasons, it is also more difficult to study them, so they are less characterized. And so the gut, but we have also other body side. We have the skin. We have the oral community. We have also the vagina. I will have also some examples on this. So the microbiome, okay, is important for the human health, but there is a lot of of interest also in other that type of environments. Actually, so it's important to study the diet, the link of diet and the human microbiome, human health. At the same time, it's also important to characterize usually the communities of food microbiomes. But, of course, this is very relevant for the One Health. We have microorganisms basically everywhere in the soil, we have forest, water, extreme environments, and so on. So how can we study the microbiome? So I want just to clarify, what is the metagenomics. So if we start from a sample, so this is an example of an oral sample, but I think we can translate this to any type of sample. So I would say the more traditional microbiology approach is to do cultivation, isolation, and then we can do some tests in the identification of particular species. We can do antibiograms. We can use PCR for specific genes. So this is the traditional way. With the sequencing, we can also sequence our isolates, and with some bioinformatics effort, we can get genomes, and then we can identify particular genes of interest. So the main limitation of this is that this can be only applied to study culture microbes that are still a minority of what we can observe. So with the metagenomics, we go directly from the sample, we directly sequence, and there is now a lot of also computational effort on bioinformatics to be able to analyze this data. It is possible to characterize unknown microbes, so these maybe microbes never described before, so this is actually quite typical, especially if we are working in non-human fields. We can potentially, from the same sample, getting multiple genomes because we have, different species. Okay, and we move on to the workflow. I don't go, too much in detail now, but it is also here actually to clarify, to emphasize another time the multidisciplinarity also of the approach. So we have the acquisition of the sample in the top left. Then with the green one, we have the experimental pi. So this is the acquisition of the sample. And if we are working this particular field, it means extraction of DNA and then sequencing. We get our data. We usually have some pre-processing to improve the quality. And then we have different type of bioinformatics analysis. So here I split in two main. So in this figure, the blue and the orange one. The blue is more computational. We go from the raw data, we generate profiles, taxonomy profiles, functional profiles, genomes, and then we have, with the orange one, the post-processing, we have our biological interpretation, clinical interpretation. Usually here, we apply biostatistical analysis to try to answer to our questions. A very important thing is the last step, so in the independent validation, it means this is also a validation with people, experts in the field. Not just, so we get some statistical results, but of course it's very important to validate them from a biological point of view. And so this is a summary of what I have presented in the previous flowchart. And now, okay, to have some more detailed examples. Actually, the machine learning, the use of machine learning in metagenomics is actually the first topic that I started to work on in this field. And what can be the use of machine learning? So machine learning that now is very connected to the concept of AI as is used now, is if can use the microbiome as a predictive as a predictive tool. So this is the analysis that I performed 10 years ago now. So we started from a very, I would say, not big data set. I mean, we considered 6 different data sets that you can see associated with different diseases. And what is the purpose here? Here is for each data set, for each cohort, we have samples from 2 main groups. So a healthy population versus the population with a disease. And so the purpose here is to apply a machine learning approach that has as input the composition of the microbiome, and we try to see if we can predict if a person is healthy or not based on the microbial composition. So the metric here is AUC is 1. It means that we have a perfect classification, so we have a perfect discrimination, so we have a strong predictability. 0.5 will be the random. Here you can see that there are different levels of discrimination. So some, for example, liver cirrhosis, colorectal cancer, IBD, we have a very good predictability, relatively close to 1. For the other, obesity and type 2 diabetes, we have less predictability. Here we also started to investigate for strain level features, but I will come to this later, that in some cases gave us some improvements. So this was like first investigation, and we are also active in developing and improving the machine learning approaches in this direction. What was actually also quite interesting, is also important, is okay, it's not just having a number that tells, okay, I have a good prediction or not, but also try to understand which are the biomarkers, so which are, in this case, the species, the particular taxa that can be associated with a particular disease. This is something that you can also get if you use some specific algorithm. But here, what it was quite interesting at the time is that we identify also some species and taxa that were important not for a single disease, but were important across different diseases. So these are species that have potentially a role in general in health. Then we focus also on more specific contexts, in particular the case of colorectal cancer. This is because based on also the previous results, is one of the most predictable from the microbiome composition. And so here we started to develop and to apply what we can define as meta-analysis, which means in which, okay, we acquire maybe new samples, new cohorts, but we want to also to integrate these cohorts with other available cohorts. So here, this was the first study. Then actually we did also other sort of follow-up. What was here? Okay, we have different cohorts. So that means basically different published studies from different labs. You can see also from different countries. And here we focus on 2 main groups, is the control group, so healthy subject versus subject with colorectal cancer. We can start from the identification of the biomarkers. And here what is important to note is this is a list of species of taxa. So you see on the right are enriched in the cancer, on the left in the control, that basically are consistent across data set. Okay, it means, okay, this is a biomarker that is found as a biomarker, in this case of CRC, independently from the data set. So these are robust biomarkers. So at that time, so here we identify some biomarkers that were actually well known as biomarkers of CRC, for example, Fusobacterium nucleatum, Parvinomonas micra that you see at the top, but there are also other that were less studied. And of course, I mean, these are a sort of example on CRC, but can be applied basically to any other type of disease if there is the availability, of course, of the data. We can also look at the numbers in terms of predictability. And here what we established was also the concept of try to validate findings on different cohorts. What does it mean? Okay, on the diagonal, we have the case on the diagonal, you see, for example, 0.92087. We have the case in which we are training and validating the model on the same population. So this can be intended as a sort of reference because I would say is also the traditional way. But off of the diagonal, we have the case in which we are training on a cohort. It means on a population, but we are testing on a different population. So here this is the meaning of validation on a different cohort and also to us the transferability of the model. And in general, you can see that there is a decrease of the accuracy. This is some way expected because we are transferring among different populations. But on the bottom, with LODO, that means leave one dataset out. We have the case in which we are putting all the datasets together to build the model, and we are just testing on the remaining one. And in this case, you see that the numbers are more closer to what you have on the diagram that is the reference. And actually, in some cases, you can see on the right, you can have actually an improvement. So this means that actually putting together samples here from independent dataset was actually useful to improve the prediction. At that time, also, I mean, we found, and this actually also related to some of the discussion that we did before, is that in general is difficult, quite challenging to reuse the data. And so we started also to build a resource that we named Curated Metagenomic Data, in which basically we make the reuse of public data simpler. So we starting from public datasets. Actually, I mean, we also integrate our new generated data. We download the data, and then what is quite time-consuming is we standardize the metadata. So we standardize the metadata, and then we process all the samples, all the data sets with the same bioinformatics pipeline, and then we release a package. So currently, this is a package that you can download in R, in the bioconductor. In the future, it will be in a different way. So here, this was the original publication. We had around only 30 datasets, but now we have hundreds of datasets with curated information. And then here are other examples in which the machine learning approach and the integration of different datasets can be used in a different context. So these are examples of works in which I collaborated. In particular, the last one now, there is also a lot of interest in developing solutions based on machine learning approaches for personalized nutrition, in which also the microbiome is important. Now we move to what is the concept of strain-resolved metagenomics. So we are you have familiar with the concept of strain and the importance of strain. So this is actually very important when we are talking about pathogens. For example, the classical case can be Escherichia coli. Escherichia coli is a commensal strain. Around half of us has Escherichia coli in their gut. Very commensal. I mean, we are healthy, but we can have also very pathogenic strains with very severe infections. And so we have the Escherichia in the gut, we can find also in the environment. And so it is more established to have also solutions to do analysis from the isolate. So this is actually what usually have with comparative genomic analysis, isolates, and we do comparative genomic analysis, for example, Escherichia coli, and there is another case of Staphylococcus aureus that is a pathogen. But what is more challenging is doing a similar thing, but starting from the metagenome. So why it can be important to be able to do strain resolver metagenome also from strain resolver resolution from a metagenome? So let's see to understand. So from a 16S is another type of sequencing. We usually are not able to really reach the species level resolution. We have usually a genus level resolution. So with the metagenomes, we have more established tools now. I mean, very established, a lot of different tools to identify the particular species. But what is actually the ongoing, it means that there is still some refinements to do, is to do strain level metagenomic profiles. So not only to identify which is the species, but also identify which are the particular strains. This can be very important to strain identification and the strain tracking. So strain tracking, of course, this is also important in a One Health perspective. So strain tracking, it means space, it means among different individuals, animals, individuals, environments, and also in time, it means longitudinal. If we can see if we have the same strain, we have a replacement of the strain, and so on. And identification of the strain is like also important, also if we want to have some also genomic and in particular functional characterization. So I have been active in developing tools to do strain level metagenomics and here we can think to two main approaches. I want to show some, which is the output that we can get from this type of analysis. And so this is in particular, so a tool that we developed, Pamphlan. So here what we have, here is a focus on a single species that in this case is Escherichia coli. We have different columns here are different individuals, more than 1,000 individuals. Here we are starting directly from the metagenome. So we don't have the isolate of Escherichia coli, but we have the metagenome, so that we get from the sample, from the fecal sample. And then running this tool, we can identify the pangenome of Escherichia coli. So we can identify which are the genes that are present or absent in each sample. So with the red one, we have the core genes. So they are genes that are shared, that are basically present in all the strains. And on the top, instead, we have presence and absence of different genes. We can have also other tools that are not going into this sort of identification of genes, but are more useful when we want to track strains. I will show some examples. This is the case of strainfla. So for give some examples, here is the case in which we used Pamphlan in this case, and a focus on the human gut, and we compare different individuals based on the habitual diet, particular three main diet: omnivores, vegetarians, and vegans. And here we found how there was different basically strains when looking at the presence and absence of specific genes of this Prevotella copri. So here, okay, we found this sort of separation and gradient, vegan, vegetarian, omnivore for this species, and of course we didn't find for most of the other species that we have in the gut. Instead, the other tool that is strainfla can be more powerful if we want to track strains. When we developed this tool was actually for this project that was to characterize the development of the human microbiome in the infants, so in the very first days and and months of life. This is because in the very first months of life, we have strong changes in the microbiome of the infant, and this can have an impact on the health. And so we sampled the infant, you said different days, months. We have the oral, the gut, and also here the mother. The mother was just in this study a single sampling, and we identify with these tools a lot. All patterns of transmission from the mother to the infant. Then we did, and with the other collaborators, a lot of different studies in this direction, and try to explore, to enlarge the analysis, not only of, for example, mother-infant, but also the father, the siblings, the environment. And of course, it is difficult if you think you want to expand analysis, sampling more types, more type of samples, more individuals. And we also, what was on the bottom, try to, this is a paper in which I collaborated, to identify the transmission of microbes from person to person. So not only from mother to infant, but also basically in individuals that are in connection. And so this is bring it to also the idea to have a social component of the microbiome. And a very different approach that I want to introduce is instead in which we extract, reconstruct genomes. Again, this is not from the isolates, but is directly from the metagenomes. So here is the pipeline, and we have the degeneration of what are defined as, if you read the papers, MAGs, that are metagenome assembled genomes. So there are different computational steps. And when we established this framework was for this, this first sort of publication, in which we build a catalog of genomes from metagenomes from very large amount of different countries, also body sites, and also at that time it was also evident that there was the more sampling from some regions. We have a lot of studies from Europe, from United States, especially from China, less, for example, from Africa. But as also I said before, it's very important also to get samples from these less studied regions, because there is a strong also specificity. So species that are very geographic specific, and these can be also important potentially for the health. And so it is also in this publication, also as I discussed before, that we found okay, it's reported here. So in total, we identify around 5,000 of species that basically occur in at least one individual. But we found that most of these species were more prevalent in non-westernized populations, non-industrialized populations. This means that there is a lot of, the human microbiome is the most studied, but in less studied population, we can think that we are still not able to see the full diversity, biodiversity that we have there. And the same approach at the end can be applied with some limitation, because for different type of samples have for different characteristics. But basically, these are the same approach applied in different, so the human, the food, environmental, the animal. And there is also efforts in do a standardization of the taxonomy, because this is another important thing. And what is then this is like a sort of starting point in building this resource, and starting from there, we try to investigate in details more in species. For example, this is the case of Microbiome. This is often associated with a health condition. It can be also found in different type of host. And this also here we found some very interesting patterns. And then, just to conclude my talk, what is also my interest now is to link more the human with the food microbiome, and what some of studies that we did was to study the diversity of, in particular, of lactic acid bacterial and bifidobacterial. So these are lactic acid bacteria are very prevalent, are very studied in the food microbiome. They are very important role in food production. Bifidobacteria are important in probiotics, but it was much less known how they are prevalent and in the human microbiome. And so we used big amount of metagenomes, and we integrated here integrative analysis, isolated genomes from different food, human, and different environments, and also genomes that we reconstructed directly from the metagenomes. And here, for example, in the case of lactic acid bacteria, we found 30 species that were relatively prevalent in the human gut. Abundance was very variable, and we found links to some of these are also species that can be found in the food, and we found links between the consumption of, when we do the link between the geography, and we can think some links in which we can find a higher abundance or prevalence of particular species in a particular, in this case, country or continent, and this can be related to the food consumption. Then we also do some more analysis at strain level resolution. For example, here in this case, Streptococcus thermophilus, this is a species very prevalent, 30% of us has, and we found a strong overlap between strains from food and the human, suggesting that there was probably a mix of strains, and so the strains that we have in the gut are coming from food sources. Instead, in other cases, we found a very clear separation between human strains and food strains. Another example is the case of bifidobacteria. Bifidobacteria, here we found in particular quite strong patterns and so very different prevalence and abundance based on westernized versus non-westernized populations. So they were much more prevalent in westernized populations. Then we did also here more targeted analysis, but just to conclude, we are also here building resources that try to easy the analysis of this type of data. So some way mimic the human effort. We also doing this for the food, and so this here the original, the first release in which we put together more than 10,000 of food metagenomes. These were metagenomes from public repositories and others that were specifically acquired from from an European project. And also here actually was quite evident, and is still evident now, that there is oversampling of some countries. And of course, also in terms of you can think how much diversity we have in terms of food, so how much diversity we have in terms of microbial communities. So also here is very important to acquire data, to get data, in this case from food, also from other parts that you can see here in gray. And here, in total, we identify around 1,000 species in the food. Also here, we found a good portion that were new. And we found, I mean, I don't have the time to show here, but we found a quite strong overlap between food and human sources. And now we are conducting more in-depth analysis to try to understand better the relationship between food consumption and then human microbiome composition and also human health. To conclude, this is the only slide about the non-bacterial part. As I said, also because in the human, for example, in the human microbiome, the microeukaryotes are very, very low abundant. But, for example, in the case of the food, there is also the importance of, for example, yeast. So this is the case of Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Here, also we are trying also to improve in the tools, also to be able to do characterization also for non-bacterial part of the microbiome. So to conclude, so strains, of course, are relevant if we go in One Health perspective, since we have different strains can be linked to different functions. We identified also from strains, we are able to identify transmissibility among individuals, but also different environments, and this can be, of course, relevant in terms of risk. We have, now tools, but of course we are still improving to be able to have large-scale analysis that are linking human, food, animal with environmental. And I would say, in my perspective, is very important, and I also show some example, is to have some resources that can be curated, standardized, and this both in terms of metadata and also in terms of processing pipelines. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Professor Pasoli, for this wonderful presentation. Highlight really the importance of microbiome in the humans. I sincerely hope that our students from the medical school were here listening, because this is very important for them. Now, we have about 15 minutes or so for questions. If you have questions, I'll ask our speakers to come just here on the stage. 15 minutes, and then we'll stop exactly at 12:30 as we planned earlier. Professor Nada and then Dr. Garnier, just come here. So if you have questions, please, if you have lights so that you can have the microphone. If you have any questions to our speakers, burning question. Otherwise, if everything goes clear, and yes, so here's one.
Thanks again for the opportunity. I just want to ask a question. That's something that really got my attention, Dr. Julie, when you mentioned the different models.
We have problem with hearing you, So.
Can you hear me okay? Is it better? No? I think they can hear me here.
Yeah.
Now it's better. Okay. Sorry. So this is a question for Dr. Julie, if I can. Something really caught my attention when you mentioned the different models. The live-in with, when you closed your presentation and speech. From a sociological point of view, do you think human beings are capable of changing their habits and going a bit backward to be able to live with the nature, as you mentioned?
Can you hear? Yeah. Thank you for this question, and I'm glad you picked up on that. I think it's a deep question, and to me, it's not going backwards. That's really the main, and sadly for a lot of people, it means going backwards. Same as, you know, biodiversity integrated in businesses means less profitability. No, it's actually going forward and reconnecting with something that we have forgotten all along. And that lack of connectivity has put us in this situation where we're at. That lack of resilience, that lack of the health issues that we are having are all connected to a loss of biodiversity, actually. If you do, I won't go into the deep analysis, but when you're looking at nutrition problem, malnutrition, etc. So it's not going backwards. It's reconnecting with something we have forgotten. We addressed some of the key questions. Why was it forgotten? I think the siloed approach and that hierarchy knowledge is really important. You know, often as scientists, we position ourselves as knowledge holders. There are a lot of different types of knowledge. There are lot of different types of knowledge holders. And again, it's by putting everybody together. There is room for nature, and we need to place nature back at the center. So moving forward with nature. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other question, please? Here is one. Front seat.
So, thank you very much for those speakers. And my question goes to Professor Nada. I'm very pleased that to see in your presentation that you are linking human deficiency in nutrients and on soils, and then very important to see also this link. It's not happening, and what we don't talk so much about these things, especially in medical sciences and all of these things. I'm very happy, and specifically not only in the iron issues that you highlight, but also more important vitamins. And we know some soils in Asia, in United States, but also coming in Africa, lacking some important mineral, vitamins, but also some trace metals, element trace like selenium, for example. We have in some areas more selenium, in some areas less selenium, and we know very, very important how important selenium in human being for plant themselves to adapt themselves to stress, but also for the human being in terms of some disease, some cardiovascular disease, some of other things like thyroid and some other things. So it's more common than a question, but I think that you have more to say than myself.
Thank you very much for your comment. In fact, nowadays, we promote prevention rather than treatment. And I did not have enough time to describe in more details the different approaches. So we first have the food fortification that comes adding some minerals and vitamins to the food that has already been processed and being ready to be sold in the market. And then we can add some, like for example, in Morocco, we have vitamin A being added to the oil, we have iron being added to the wheat, and we can have several other examples. To do so, we need to have the industry being part of this process, and this is quite challenging. And to do so, we need to mitigate the costs of the product and also to promote the consumer to choose the right product. So it's quite challenging. Now we have the education of the consumer. And like, for example, in Morocco, we do have the labeling on the product. But guess what? 72% of Moroccan never read the label on the product. So nutrition education is something that may have long-term effect, but it needs a lot of effort and persistency and perseverance in a way to see the changes in consumer behavior. And we do have like the supplementation, which is like giving one single dose concentrated to basically women and children. And this is like the huge task of the Ministry of Health. Now, when it comes to biofortification, it is innovative, and it is grounded, and it is feasible. And instead of promoting people to choose, they already receive into their plate a food that is already fortified. And you people used to say, so how is it? How is it going to work? And there are several studies that really confirm that if the soil is fortified with specific nutrients, the crop will absorb these nutrients. Not only it will be rich in those nutrients, but the health of the plant itself is going to be better, more resilient, more resistant, and in better quality. So as a consumer, if I receive a carrot that has more beta-carotene, for example, compared to one that is the usual I have, so naturally I'm going to have more vitamin A in my body, and on and on. And several studies in Bangladesh, in India, in some African countries have demonstrated that, yes, biofortification improves the nutritional status of the population. So innovation is really needed, and if I go to the One Health concept, biofortification completely fits within this process, and I really appreciate the connectiveness. I mean, the different disciplines should all together bring these different specialities, because we are all here to promote human health and human being. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Okay, Juan, please.
Thank you. And as we're on this very interesting topic, I just wanted to ask a follow-up question to this very nice comment and to your response. If you place two foods side by side, they contain the same amount of, let's say, iron, but one is because the processor has added the iron versus the other, which was biofortified due to the plant being better nourished, are they equivalent for the human consuming those foods?
Well, so when we consider the food, I mean, and this is one of the discussions that we had this morning on our way from Casablanca. I mean, that when we fortify with one single micronutrient, okay, so I may expect that there is an improvement in the nutritional status. Now, when I consume a natural food that is not processed, that comes with certain nutrients, and usually biofortification does not rely on one nutrient only. Usually we combine iron with iron, iron with zinc, with selenium. So within our body, in fact, it is not that one micronutrient that will help me improve my health status. It is the interaction between the different micronutrients, this synergy and the complementarity of the different role at the different level of my cell that will be seen in my overall health. So I don't have a clear answer to this, but the logic thinking, I would consider that a fresh food that's already rich in a specific nutrient may have maybe a better impact on health.
Thank you so much. If there is one more, otherwise, one last question, if there is one. Well, okay. Last question.
Thank you. So just a question for Professor Nada regarding her work on social media and nutritional education. So what do you think about if this social media education and like videos you've been working on YouTube and other stuff, is it very important to enhance nutritional education? And what do you think the link between also policy, especially for maybe social media is used by people, is not controlled by governments, but what do you think about the states channels? For instance, in Morocco, we've been seeing during Ramadan that there is a lot of advertisements for food while we're asking people to not eat and to eat healthy. So there is a dilemma between using a lot of food and using nutritional food that has been, always, we've been asking to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. And this is the truth that we are living in nowadays. And here maybe the consumer awareness is something that is crucial. Myself, with a group of researchers, we have conducted several studies on analyzing the YouTube content on several topics related to nutrition. I remember that we have done a research on the breastfeeding in Arab countries. We did an analysis about the diet, such as hypertension, anti-hypertension diet, which is called the DASH. And we also did an analysis about carbs counting that goes specifically for type 1 diabetes patients. And we use the specific tools to understand how reliable those YouTubes are that are available to everyone. And unfortunately, several of them were not scientifically reliable. Yet, they are on YouTube and people are watching them. I totally agree with you that not everything that we can see on the social media, not YouTube, we have several other platforms such as the Instagram, TikTok, and on, and that are not always scientifically reliable, but they are affordable and everyone can see them. I agree with you that we need to work more on this. And unfortunately, the youth generation is very much affected by this. And when we talk about the youth, this is the future adult generation that we are willing them to be in a good health, as I have mentioned in the life cycle, that having adults that are in a good health means that elderly in a good health, but also the entire life cycle will ensure a healthy nation. When we talk about food, it is something very complex. I mean, I understand that there are some advertisements, but there is a system. Unfortunately, there was not enough time to talk about this. We talk nowadays, the same way we are discussing about One Health, we talk about the food systems. And we talk about food systems, we have the human as a very tiny, small component. We did something that is really huge. I mean, we have several factors, including the agriculture, but also we have the environment, the food environment, we have the industry, we have the advertisements, we have the health of the individual, we have the socio-economic level, the intellectual level, we have the other factors nowadays, we have the different political, the climate change. So there are several many factors that influence on that specific behavior of the consumer into choosing one specific food. So that's why through the One Health, I believe that we are all having a role to do something. Everyone from his own expertise, being concerned about promoting nutrition, promoting health, we all together and jointly, we can achieve a common objective. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Nada. Thank you so much to all the speakers for the wonderful presentations. This concludes our morning session, and let's warmly thank the three speakers. Okay. And see you at 2 o'clock. Have a good lunch. Thank you so much.